Can't Hurt Me, by David Goggins. Part 1. The Boy Who Refused to Stay Broken. Imagine being born into a life where every day feels like a fight. Not a fight for success. Not a fight for wealth. A fight just to survive. A young boy sits quietly in the corner of a small house. Outside, the world moves normally. Children laugh. Families eat dinner together. People sleep peacefully at night. But inside this house, fear lives here. The boy's name is David. And every sound makes him nervous. A door slamming. Footsteps in the hallway. The sound of his father's voice. Because in his world, those sounds often meant trouble was coming. David's father owned a successful skating rink. To outsiders, everything looked perfect. A thriving business. A respectable family. A normal life. But behind closed doors, reality was very different. His father was abusive, violent, controlling. The home that should have been a place of safety became a place of fear. And for years, young David lived under that shadow. Many people believe that successful individuals are born confident, born strong, born fearless. But David Goggins was none of those things. As a child, he struggled in school. His grades were poor. He lacked confidence. He constantly doubted himself. And the trauma he experienced at home followed him everywhere. One day, his mother made a decision. A decision that would change everything. She took David and left. They escaped. No plan. No guarantees. Just a desperate hope for a better life. For many people, that would have been the happy ending. The moment where everything suddenly improves. But life isn't a movie. And David's struggles were only beginning. The family moved into poverty. Money became scarce. Life remained difficult. And David found himself facing a new challenge. Racism, isolation, and the crushing feeling that he didn't belong anywhere. At school, he fell behind. While other students seemed to move forward effortlessly, David struggled to keep up. Reading was difficult. Learning felt impossible. Every failure seemed to confirm what he secretly believed about himself. Maybe I'm just not good enough. That sentence became a prison. A prison built inside his own mind. And over time, the walls grew stronger. Years passed. David gained weight. His confidence disappeared. His dreams became smaller. And eventually, he became the person many people become when life repeatedly knocks them down. Someone who stopped believing in himself. By his early 20s, David weighed nearly 300 pounds. He worked a job spraying for cockroaches. Every day felt exactly the same. Wake up, go to work, come home, watch television, sleep, repeat. The little boy who once dreamed of becoming something greater was disappearing. Not because he lacked potential, but because he believed the lies his mind kept telling him. One evening changed everything. David was sitting in front of the television, channel surfing, wasting another night. Then he saw a documentary. It featured Navy SEALs, men pushing themselves beyond what seemed humanly possible, running through pain, enduring suffering, refusing to quit. David couldn't stop watching. These men looked nothing like him. They lived differently, thought differently, acted differently. And suddenly, a question appeared. A question that would change the course of his entire life. What if I'm capable of more? Not tomorrow. Not years from now. Right now. For the first time in years, he stopped focusing on his limitations. And started imagining his potential. That moment didn't magically transform him. He didn't become a Navy SEAL overnight. He didn't suddenly gain confidence. He didn't suddenly become strong. But something much more important happened. He became honest with himself. He looked in the mirror. And for the first time, he stopped making excuses. He realized that while life had treated him unfairly, he could no longer allow his past to control his future. That realization became the foundation of everything that followed. Because according to David Goggins, the biggest obstacle in your life isn't your circumstances. It's the story you tell yourself about your circumstances. And David was finally ready to rewrite his story. But deciding to change is easy. Actually changing, that's where the real battle begins. Because David's dream of becoming a Navy SEAL seemed impossible, He was overweight, out of shape, and nowhere near the standards required. Most people would have quit before they started. Most people would have looked at the mountain and walked away. But David made a different choice. He decided that instead of listening to the voice that said, "You can't," he would prove that voice wrong. One painful step at a time. And what happened next would push his body, mind, and spirit beyond limits he never thought possible. Part 2. The decision that changed everything. Most people have experienced a moment when they looked at their life and realized something had to change. Not next month. Not next year. Now. For David Goggins, that moment came while staring at his reflection. What he saw wasn't just extra weight. It wasn't just poor fitness. It wasn't just an unfulfilling job. What he saw was potential being wasted. A life that could be so much more. A future slowly slipping away. At nearly 300 pounds, David knew the truth. If he continued living the same way, nothing would change. And nothing changes if nothing changes. That's when he made a decision. Not a wish. Not a goal. A decision. He would become a Navy SEAL. The problem? He was nowhere near qualified. Not even close. To become a Navy SEAL, candidates needed to meet strict physical requirements. David couldn't even complete many of the basic standards. Running was difficult. Pull-ups were nearly impossible. His body was completely unprepared. Most people would have looked at those requirements and said, "Maybe someday." David said, "Let's begin." The next few months became a war. Not against other people. Against himself. Every morning he woke up exhausted. Every workout hurt. Every run felt impossible. His body screamed for him to stop. But Goggins began learning one of the most important lessons of his life. Your mind will quit long before your body does. Think about that. How many times have you said, "I'm too tired. I can't do this. I've had enough." Often, the body still has plenty left to give. It's the mind that wants comfort. The mind that wants safety. The mind that wants to avoid pain. David realized that if he wanted a different life, he would need to become someone capable of enduring discomfort. So he pushed harder. Day after day, week after week, month after month, the weight began to disappear. 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 40 pounds, 50 pounds. Then something incredible happened. The impossible started becoming possible. He wasn't transformed overnight. There was no dramatic movie montage. No magical breakthrough. Just thousands of small decisions. Thousands of moments where he chose discipline over comfort. One workout, one run, one meal, one choice at a time. This is something many people misunderstand about success. Success rarely happens in one giant moment. It happens through small victories repeated over and over again. Eventually, David lost over 100 pounds in just a few months. An astonishing transformation. One that shocked everyone around him. But the greatest transformation wasn't physical. It was mental. For the first time in his life, David was proving something to himself. Every completed workout became evidence. Evidence that he was stronger than he thought. Evidence that he could overcome obstacles. Evidence that his old story was wrong. And that's when he discovered what he later called the accountability mirror. Every morning, he looked into the mirror. No excuses. No lies. No blaming others. Just brutal honesty. If he was failing, he admitted it. If he was slacking, he admitted it. If he wasn't working hard enough, he admitted it. Because real growth begins when excuses end. Most people spend their lives protecting their ego. David decided to challenge his. Every single day, the accountability mirror became a weapon. A tool that forced him to face reality. Not the reality he wished existed. The reality that actually existed. And reality was simple. The gap between where he was and where he wanted to be could only be closed through work. Lots of work. Soon, David passed the initial fitness requirements. The impossible dream was becoming real. But, life wasn't finished testing him. Not even close. Because becoming a Navy SEAL isn't just about physical strength. It's about surviving one of the most difficult military training programs in the world. A place where strong men quit. A place where elite athletes break. A place designed to expose weakness. A place called BUD/S. Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. Many candidates arrive believing they're prepared. Most discover they're not. Pain becomes constant. Sleep becomes rare. Quitting becomes tempting. And for David Goggins, the hardest challenge of his life was about to begin. The boy who grew up terrified. The overweight exterminator. The man who once doubted everything about himself. Was about to enter a battlefield unlike anything he'd ever known. A battlefield where the enemy wasn't the ocean. Wasn't the instructors. Wasn't the training. The enemy was the voice inside his head. The voice that still whispered, "You can't." And in part 3, David will discover a powerful truth that changes everything. Most people only use a fraction of their true potential. A lesson he calls, the 40% rule. Part 3, the 40% rule. The human mind is a master of self-preservation. Its primary job is not to help you achieve greatness. Its primary job is to keep you safe, comfortable, alive. Whenever pain appears, your brain immediately begins negotiating. Slow down. Take a break. You've done enough. You can try again tomorrow. Most people listen, and because they listen, they never discover what they're truly capable of. David Goggins was about to learn this lesson in the harshest environment imaginable. BUD/S training, one of the toughest military training programs in the world. A place specifically designed to break people. Every day brought exhaustion. Every day brought pain. Every day tested the limits of the human body and mind. Candidates carried heavy boats over their heads. Ran for miles through soft sand. Spent hours in freezing water. Survived on very little sleep. And endured constant pressure from instructors whose job was to make them quit. The easiest way out was simple. Ring the bell. At the center of the training area stood a brass bell. 3 rings. That's all it took. Ring it 3 times. And the suffering ended. No more freezing water. No more endless running. No more pain. Thousands had rung that bell before. And many more would ring it after. The temptation was always there. Especially during what became known as Hell Week. 5.5 days. Almost no sleep. Continuous physical punishment. Relentless mental stress. Imagine being so tired that your vision becomes blurry. So exhausted that standing feels impossible. So cold that every muscle aches. Then being told to keep going. Most people think physical strength is what gets someone through Hell Week. But that's not true. Some of the strongest athletes quit. Some of the fastest runners quit. Some of the most gifted candidates quit. Because eventually, everyone reaches a point where muscles don't matter anymore. What matters is mindset. During one particularly brutal moment, David noticed something fascinating. Candidates around him were collapsing, giving up, walking away. Yet somehow, some people kept moving, not because they weren't suffering. They were. Not because they weren't tired. They were exhausted, but they refused to accept the limits their minds were presenting. That's when Goggins developed a belief that would later become famous around the world. The 40% rule. The idea is simple. When your mind tells you you're done, when it tells you you've reached your limit, you're often only operating at around 40% of your actual capability. Think about that. How many dreams have people abandoned because they felt tired? How many goals have people given up on because they felt uncomfortable? How many opportunities have been lost because someone believed they had reached their limit? The limit was often imaginary. A protective mechanism, not reality. David discovered that when he pushed beyond what he thought was possible, there was often another level waiting. And then another. And another. The body could do more. The mind simply needed proof. This lesson extended far beyond military training. It applied to life itself. Many people never start businesses because they're afraid. Many never pursue dreams because they're uncertain. Many never improve their lives because comfort feels safer than growth. But growth lives outside comfort. Always has. Always will. Every meaningful achievement requires stepping into discomfort, learning new skills, starting over, taking risks, having difficult conversations, facing failure. None of these things feel comfortable. Yet all of them are necessary. During training, David's body suffered serious injuries, stress fractures, broken bones, constant pain. Most people would have used those injuries as reasons to quit. And honestly, many would have been justified. But Goggins had changed. The scared child who doubted himself was slowly disappearing. A new person was emerging. Someone willing to embrace suffering. Someone willing to do difficult things. Someone willing to endure pain in pursuit of a greater purpose. He began viewing suffering differently. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" he asked, "What is this teaching me?" That shift changed everything. Because suffering is often life's greatest teacher. Pain reveals weaknesses. Pain reveals fears. Pain reveals limits. And once those limits become visible, they can be challenged. David learned that confidence doesn't come before hard things. Confidence comes after hard things. Every obstacle overcome becomes evidence. Evidence that you're stronger than you thought. Evidence that you're more resilient than you believed. Evidence that you can survive challenges that once seemed impossible. That's how real confidence is built. Not through positive thinking alone, but through earned experience. One difficult challenge at a time. One victory at a time. One day at a time. Eventually, David completed the training. A goal that once seemed impossible. A dream that once felt completely out of reach. But the lesson wasn't about becoming a Navy SEAL. The lesson was about discovering potential. The lesson was about understanding that most people dramatically underestimate what they're capable of achieving. And if you can push past the voice that says, "Stop, quit, you can't," you may discover strengths you never knew existed. But David's journey was far from over. In fact, the Navy SEALs were only the beginning. Because after conquering one impossible challenge, he became addicted to proving that limits are often illusions. And in Part 4, we'll explore how David Goggins transformed suffering into a superpower and developed a mindset that would push him through some of the hardest endurance challenges on Earth. Part 4, Callousing the Mind. Most people understand how the body becomes stronger. Lift weights. Muscles tear. Muscles recover. Muscles grow. It's a simple process. Stress. Recovery. Growth. But what if the mind worked the same way? What if every challenge you faced, every setback, every uncomfortable moment, was actually strengthening something invisible? David Goggins believed exactly that. And he gave it a name. Callousing the mind. Think about your hands. If you've ever done hard physical labor, you know what happens. The skin becomes rough, thicker, stronger. A callus forms, not because the work became easier, but because repeated exposure made you tougher. Goggins realized the mind operates in a similar way. Every time you do something difficult, every time you face discomfort instead of avoiding it, every time you keep going when you want to quit, you're building mental calluses. And over time, things that once seemed impossible begin to feel normal. Most people spend their lives avoiding discomfort. They avoid difficult conversations, avoid challenges, avoid failure, avoid rejection, avoid anything that threatens comfort. But every time they run from discomfort, they also run from growth. David chose a different path. After becoming a Navy SEAL, he wasn't satisfied. Not because he wanted more recognition. Not because he wanted fame. He wanted to see where his limits really were. So he started searching for bigger challenges. Harder challenges. Challenges so extreme that most people wouldn't even attempt them. That's when he discovered ultramarathons. Imagine running 10 kilometers. Difficult. Now imagine running a marathon. 42 kilometers. Now imagine running 100 miles. Over 160 kilometers. Without stopping. Many ultramarathons push athletes through mountains, extreme weather, sleep deprivation, exhaustion, and unimaginable pain. To most people, it sounds insane. And honestly, to David, it sounded insane too. The difference was that he decided to do it anyway. One day, he learned about a race benefiting the families of fallen military members. The event required competitors to run 100 miles. There was just one problem. David had never run anywhere close to 100 miles. In fact, he had barely trained. Most people would have waited, prepared more, built experience first. David signed up. The race arrived, and reality hit hard. Hours passed. Pain intensified. His legs began failing. His feet swelled. His body started breaking down. At one point, he could barely move. Blood appeared in his urine. Stress fractures developed. Every step felt like torture. His body was screaming, "Stop." His mind was screaming, "Quit." But something else was happening. A deeper voice had begun to emerge. A voice forged through years of suffering. A voice strengthened by every hardship he had ever endured. And that voice said, "Keep going. One more mile. Then another. Then another. Hour after hour. Step after step. David eventually crossed the finish line. Broken. Destroyed. Barely able to stand. But he had done it. Not because he was superhuman. Not because he was born different. Because he had trained his mind to continue long after comfort disappeared. This became one of the central lessons of Can't Hurt Me. Your mind will often create limits that don't actually exist. It will tell you you're done. When you still have more to give. It will tell you you're weak. When you're actually growing stronger. It will tell you to quit. Right before a breakthrough. Most people never discover this because they stop at the first sign of discomfort. David discovered it because he kept going. Again, and again, and again. The more suffering he endured, the more evidence he collected. Evidence that he could survive difficult things. Evidence that pain wasn't permanent. Evidence that limits were often self-imposed. And that's where true confidence comes from. Not motivation, not inspiration, not positive quotes. Confidence comes from evidence. The evidence you create by keeping promises to yourself. The evidence you create by doing hard things. The evidence you create by refusing to quit. Every difficult challenge completed becomes another brick in the foundation of self-belief. David called this process building your mental armor. Because when life inevitably becomes difficult, and it will, you won't rise to the level of your hopes. You'll fall to the level of your preparation. And mental toughness is built before the storm arrives. Not during it. By the time David finished that race, something inside him had changed forever. He no longer feared suffering. Because suffering had become his teacher. But the next lesson would be even more powerful. Because David realized that our biggest enemy isn't failure. It isn't pain. It isn't hardship. It's the comfortable version of ourselves that refuses to grow. And in part 5, we'll explore one of David Goggins' most famous concepts. The cookie jar. A mental tool that can help you overcome doubt, fear, and impossible situations by using the strength you've already earned. Part 5. The cookie jar. Imagine you're standing at the edge of quitting. Not physically. Mentally. You've worked hard. You've pushed yourself. You've endured challenges. And now, a voice inside your head is saying, "I can't do this anymore. I'm not strong enough. Maybe I'm not capable." Every person on earth has experienced this moment. A moment where doubt becomes louder than belief. A moment where fear becomes stronger than confidence. The question is, what do you do next? Most people search for motivation. They watch videos, read quotes, listen to inspiring speeches. And while motivation can help, it has one major weakness. It doesn't last. Some days you'll feel motivated. Other days you won't. If your success depends entirely on motivation, your progress will constantly rise and fall. David Goggins discovered a different strategy. A strategy he calls the cookie jar. Imagine a giant jar sitting on a shelf. Inside that jar are memories. Not ordinary memories. Victories. Hard-earned victories. Every difficult challenge you've overcome. Every obstacle you've survived. Every moment you thought you couldn't continue but did anyway. Each one is a cookie. And whenever life becomes difficult, you reach into that jar. You remind yourself of who you already are. David learned this lesson during some of the hardest moments of his life. Moments where pain became overwhelming. Moments where quitting seemed reasonable. Moments where failure felt inevitable. Instead of focusing on what he couldn't do, he started remembering what he had already done. The abuse he survived as a child. The poverty he endured. The weight he lost. The Navy SEAL training he completed. The ultramarathons he finished. Every challenge became proof. Proof that he was stronger than his current struggle. And that's what most people forget. When life gets hard, they focus entirely on the obstacle in front of them. They forget the mountains they've already climbed. Think about your own life. Maybe you've survived heartbreak. Maybe you've overcome financial struggles. Maybe you've battled self-doubt. Maybe you've recovered from failure. Maybe you've carried responsibilities nobody else understood. Those experiences matter, because they are evidence. Evidence that you are more resilient than you think. The problem is that we often forget our victories. We remember our failures, our mistakes, our regrets, but we ignore the challenges we've already conquered. David refused to do that. Whenever doubt appeared, he reached into his cookie jar. He remembered every hardship he had survived, every impossible situation he had overcome, every moment where quitting would have been easier. And those memories became fuel. Because confidence isn't created out of thin air. Confidence is built from evidence. Imagine two people standing before a difficult challenge. The first person says, "I hope I can do this." The second person says, "I've done hard things before. I'll find a way." Which person is more likely to succeed? The second, not because they're necessarily stronger, but because they have proof. The cookie jar is proof. Proof that your past victories can help you survive present struggles. One of the most powerful ideas in Can't Hurt Me is that your life story can either become a prison or a source of strength. Many people allow painful experiences to define them. They say, "Because this happened to me, I can't succeed." David chose a different perspective. He said, "Because I survived this, I am stronger." The same event, a completely different meaning. That's the power of perspective. Your struggles can become excuses, or they can become weapons. Your failures can become evidence of weakness, or evidence of growth. Your past can hold you back, or push you forward. The choice is yours. As David continued pushing his limits, he realized something extraordinary. Every challenge completed made the next challenge slightly easier. Not physically, mentally. Because each victory added another cookie to the jar. Another reminder. Another piece of evidence. Another reason to believe. Eventually, his cookie jar became enormous. Filled with stories of endurance, resilience, discipline, and courage. But there was still one problem. No matter how mentally tough you become, no matter how strong you grow, there will always be another challenge waiting. A bigger challenge, a harder challenge, a challenge that forces you to discover a new version of yourself. And David Goggins was about to face exactly that. Because in the next chapter, he learns that greatness isn't achieved by reaching one goal. It's achieved by constantly redefining what's possible. We'll explore the mindset that transformed him from someone seeking confidence into someone obsessed with continuous growth. Part 6. Becoming uncommon among the uncommon. Most people dream of becoming extraordinary. They want success, recognition, achievement. They want to separate themselves from the crowd. But David Goggins eventually discovered something interesting. Once you become extraordinary, you're surrounded by other extraordinary people. And then a new question appears. How do you become uncommon among the uncommon? Because excellence has levels. Think about the Navy SEALs. To most people, becoming a Navy SEAL already seems impossible. The training is brutal. The standards are elite. The commitment is relentless. Yet inside that world, there are still people who stand out. People who push harder, work longer, suffer more, demand more from themselves. David became obsessed with finding out where his true limits were. Not because he wanted fame. Not because he wanted applause. Because he realized something. Potential means nothing unless it's tested. Most people spend their entire lives wondering what they're capable of. David wanted answers. So instead of slowing down after becoming a Navy SEAL, he accelerated. He entered more ultramarathons, more endurance races, more impossible challenges. Every event became a laboratory, a place to test the human spirit. And every challenge revealed the same truth. The mind usually quits first. One race after another, David pushed himself into territory that seemed impossible. 100-mile races, 24-hour endurance events, extreme physical punishment. There were moments when his body completely broke down. His feet became swollen and bloody. Toenails fell off. Bones cracked under pressure. Muscles screamed for rest. Yet somehow, he continued. People often asked, "Why do you do this?" It's a reasonable question. Why willingly choose suffering? Why endure pain most people spend their lives trying to avoid? David's answer was simple. Because suffering reveals who you really are. When everything is comfortable, anyone can feel confident. Anyone can feel motivated. Anyone can feel strong. But what happens when you're exhausted? When you're afraid? When things aren't going your way? When every part of you wants to quit? That's when character is revealed. That's when you discover your true identity. Most people think confidence comes from success. David believed confidence comes from surviving difficult things. Every challenge completed became another piece of evidence. Evidence that he could endure more than he thought. Evidence that pain was temporary. Evidence that limits could be expanded. And slowly, a new mindset emerged. Instead of asking, "Can I do this?" he started asking, "How far can I go?" The difference is powerful. The first question focuses on fear. The second focuses on possibility. Many people spend their lives trying to avoid failure. David spent his life trying to discover his potential. And those are very different missions. One keeps you safe. The other helps you grow. This doesn't mean he never struggled. Far from it. Even after achieving incredible success, self-doubt still appeared. Fear still appeared. Pain still appeared. The difference was that he no longer allowed those feelings to control his decisions. He understood something many people never learn. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward despite fear. Strength isn't the absence of pain. Strength is continuing despite pain. Confidence isn't the absence of doubt. Confidence is acting despite doubt. These lessons transformed every area of his life. Because once you prove to yourself that you can survive difficult things, the world becomes less intimidating. Challenges become opportunities. Obstacles become teachers. Failures become lessons. And slowly, you begin building a life based on growth instead of comfort. David called this mentality becoming uncommon among the uncommon. Not settling. Not becoming complacent. Not assuming you've already reached your best. Always searching for the next level. Not to impress others, but to discover who you can become. Because hidden inside every person is untapped potential. Potential buried beneath comfort. Potential buried beneath excuses. Potential buried beneath fear. Most people never uncover it. Not because they lack ability, but because they stop digging too soon. David refused to stop digging. And that's why his story resonates with millions of people around the world. It's not really a story about running, or military training, or endurance sports. It's a story about human potential. The possibility that you're capable of far more than you currently believe. But one final lesson remained. A lesson that ties everything together. A lesson about ownership, responsibility, and taking complete control of your life. In Part 7, we'll explore one of the most powerful concepts in Can't Hurt Me. Taking souls. The mindset that helped David turn adversity into fuel and become unstoppable in the face of overwhelming odds. Part 7. Taking souls. Imagine you're in a race. Not just any race. A race so difficult that most people never even attempt it. The weather is brutal. Your body is exhausted. Your muscles ache. Every step feels heavier than the last. Around you, competitors are struggling. Some are slowing down. Some are doubting themselves. Some are already planning to quit. And then something unexpected happens. You keep going. Not because you're stronger. Not because you're more talented. Not because you're naturally gifted. You keep going because you've learned to embrace suffering. And in that moment, you gain an advantage. David Goggins calls this taking souls. The phrase sounds aggressive, but it isn't about hurting people. It's about breaking expectations. It's about continuing when everyone expects you to stop. It's about refusing to surrender when circumstances suggest you should. It's about becoming so mentally resilient that your determination inspires, or intimidates, everyone around you. Throughout his life, people constantly underestimated David. As a child, people saw a scared kid. As a student, people saw poor grades. As a young adult, people saw an overweight exterminator with no future. When he wanted to become a Navy SEAL, many thought he couldn't do it. When he entered ultramarathons, people doubted him. When he pursued impossible goals, critics appeared everywhere. And every time, he used their doubt as fuel. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove himself right. That's an important distinction. Many people spend their lives seeking validation from others. They want approval, recognition, acceptance. David realized that external validation is temporary. What matters is the opinion you have of yourself. Can you trust yourself? Can you keep promises to yourself? Can you continue when nobody is watching? Those are the questions that matter. One of the most powerful examples of taking souls happened during endurance races. Competitors would see David struggling, limping, bleeding, clearly in pain. They assumed he was finished. Then somehow, he would keep moving, hour after hour, mile after mile. The people around him began questioning themselves. If he's still going, why am I slowing down? If he can continue through that pain, what's my excuse? That's the essence of taking souls. Not defeating people physically. Defeating the limitations they believe are impossible to overcome. And it starts with defeating your own. Because before you can inspire anyone else, you must first conquer yourself. Think about your own life. Maybe your challenge isn't an ultramarathon. Maybe it's building a business. Maybe it's learning a new skill. Maybe it's improving your health. Maybe it's pursuing a dream you've been postponing for years. Whatever the challenge is, there will always be moments when quitting feels reasonable. Moments when excuses sound convincing. Moments when comfort feels more attractive than growth. Those are the moments that define you. Not the easy days. Not the successful days. The difficult days. The days when nobody would blame you for stopping. And yet you continue. David discovered something extraordinary. Most people are capable of much more than they realize. The problem isn't ability. The problem is belief. People underestimate themselves. They stop too soon. They settle too early. They allow fear to make decisions on their behalf. David refused to do that. Every challenge became an opportunity to expand what he believed was possible. And with every victory, his confidence grew, not because life became easier, because he became stronger. Eventually, he understood a truth that changed everything. Life will never stop testing you. There will always be obstacles. There will always be setbacks. There will always be pain. The goal isn't to avoid those things. The goal is to become the kind of person who can handle them. That's why mental toughness matters. Not because it eliminates problems. Because it prepares you for them. And when you're prepared, challenges lose their power to intimidate you. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what can I learn from this? That shift transforms adversity into growth. Pain into wisdom. Failure into fuel. By now, David Goggins had become living proof of what's possible when someone refuses to accept limitations. But there was one final lesson. The lesson that sits at the heart of Can't Hurt Me. A lesson about responsibility, ownership, and taking complete control of your life. Because no matter what happened in your past, no matter what challenges you've faced, no matter how unfair life has been, you still have the power to choose your response. And in the final chapter, We'll bring everything together and discover the ultimate message behind David Goggins' extraordinary journey. Part 8. The Accountability Mirror and the Ultimate Challenge. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. Not for a few seconds. Not to fix your hair. Not to check your appearance. Imagine standing there long enough to see the truth. The real truth. The truth about your habits. Your excuses. Your fears. Your potential. Most people avoid this kind of honesty. It's uncomfortable. It's easier to blame circumstances. Blame luck. Blame other people. Blame the economy. Blame the past. And sometimes those things genuinely affect us. Sometimes life is unfair. Sometimes terrible things happen. David Goggins understood that better than most. He grew up in abuse. Experienced racism. Struggled with learning disabilities. Lived in poverty. Faced countless obstacles. He had every reason to become bitter. Every reason to give up. Every reason to accept a small life. But he made a different choice. He looked into the accountability mirror. And he asked himself a simple question. What am I going to do about it? Not, whose fault is this? Not, why did this happen? Not, why is life unfair? Instead, what am I going to do now? That question changed everything. Because responsibility is power. The moment you take ownership of your life, you stop waiting for someone else to save you. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop waiting for confidence. You start taking action. And action changes lives. Throughout this journey, David learned something extraordinary. The human mind is far stronger than most people realize. The limits we accept are often far smaller than the limits we actually possess. The voice that says, "I can't," is often lying. The voice that says, "I'm done," usually appears long before you're truly finished. The voice that says, "This is impossible," often disappears the moment you accomplish it. David spent his life proving this. Not only to the world, but to himself. Every ultramarathon, every Navy SEAL challenge, every impossible obstacle, every setback, was another opportunity to test what he believed. And over time, he discovered a truth that became the foundation of "Can't Hurt Me." Most people never come close to reaching their potential. Not because they're incapable. Because they stop when things become uncomfortable. Because they settle. Because they allow fear to make decisions for them. David refused. He chose growth over comfort. Again, and again, and again. That's why his story resonates with millions of people. It's not really about running. It's not really about military training. It's not really about extreme endurance. Those are just examples. The real lesson is about confronting yourself. The real lesson is about refusing to let your past define your future. The real lesson is about becoming stronger than the excuses holding you back. Imagine what your life could look like if you stopped negotiating with weakness. If you stopped waiting for perfect conditions. If you stopped doubting yourself every time things became difficult. What goals would you pursue? What dreams would you chase? What version of yourself might emerge? Because hidden inside every person is another gear. Another level. Another version of themselves waiting to be discovered. Most people never find it. Not because it isn't there. Because they stopped searching. David Goggins never stopped searching. And that's the ultimate challenge he leaves us with. Not to become David Goggins. Not to run 100 miles. Not to become a Navy SEAL. But to discover your own potential. To stop living beneath your capabilities. To stop accepting limits you never tested. To stop allowing fear to write your story. Because, at the end of the day, the greatest competition isn't with other people. It's with the person you could become. The stronger version. The disciplined version. The courageous version. The version that exists on the other side of discomfort. And every day presents a choice. Move toward that person. Or move away from them. The choice is yours. The challenge is yours. The life is yours. And as David Goggins would say, you are capable of far more than you know. Key lessons from Can't Hurt Me. 1. Take extreme ownership. Stop blaming circumstances. Focus on what you can control. 2. Embrace discomfort. Growth happens outside your comfort zone. 3. Follow the 40% rule. When your mind says you're done, you often have much more left to give. 4. Use the cookie jar. Remember past victories when facing current challenges. 5. Build mental calluses. Doing hard things consistently makes you mentally stronger. 6. Become uncommon among the uncommon. Never settle. Continue growing even after achieving success. 7. Face the accountability mirror. Be brutally honest with yourself about where you are and where you need to improve. 8. Your past does not define you. Your response to adversity matters more than the adversity itself. If you enjoyed this summary of Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the actionable reader. Remember, the purpose of reading isn't just to collect information. It's to transform your life through action. So take one lesson from this book and apply it today. Because knowledge without action changes nothing. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and keep becoming the strongest version of yourself.